right, guys, our next guest is fresh from his debut behind the Fox UFC analyst desk from this past weekend. A top 10 ranked lightweight for the UFC. He takes on Anthony Pettis at UFC 226. It's a pleasure to welcome Michael Chiesa back to Submission Radio. And what's this? He looks like he's in some kind of pool, a pool of some sort. Michael, welcome to the program.
It's good to be here. I'm just in the tub hanging out with my buddy Joseph Benavidez.
Oh, yes. Hey. I love the hair, Joseph.
Were you behind Joseph?
This is the Broseph Benavidez Chiesa tour. We're about to beat up the Pettis brothers.
That's awesome, man. And did you guys just finish training, or what were you guys doing?
I was doing some strength conditioning, and Joseph was just wrapping up his last sparring. So we're just finishing up some recovery. So just hanging out, throwing down.
I know this isn't the fashion red carpet, but what's your take on Joseph's new hair? People are saying it's pretty sexy. People are calling him, will the real Mr. Benavidez please stand up? What do you think of it?
Dude, he's the sex god of our generation, dude. I fucking love it. Makes me want to bleach my hair, too.
Yeah, I think he started something in the UFC now. Let's talk about your Fox Analyst Desk debut. Tell us, how did you enjoy doing it? What did it feel like being behind the desk for you for the first time?
It felt really comfortable. It's something that, I've kind of envisioned doing for a long time. I've always had this problem with kind of talking too much growing up. So I figured somewhere along the lines that would apply to something positive. So, it was, I felt pretty comfortable. And it's cool to sit by Bisping. I didn't know he was going to retire the next day. But it felt good. You know what I mean? I had a little bit of nerves, once it came down to it, but that's pretty normal with anything. It's almost like a fight. I'm so comfortable with fighting, but I still get a little nervous right before I fight. So it was almost like the same thing. I felt comfortable in the same sense. Once push came to shove, it was time to go live. I was a little nervous, but that's good. Kept me on edge, and from the feedback I've gotten, I did pretty well.
Yeah, obviously got to get your thoughts on Bisping in a second. But yeah, how do you feel about it? Do you watch something back like this? Do you sort of watch your, I guess, in this sense, your performance of sorts, and do you sort of analyze it yourself? And do you feel good about it?
I haven't gone back and watched it yet, but, I definitely want to go critique myself and make some adjustments. Obviously, it's my first time, so there's a lot of things that need to be worked on. I always try to undershoot myself, so I always, keep myself on my toes. But a lot of people said I did really well for a debuter, so I still want to go back. I want to critique myself. I want to get better. This is something that I can see myself doing, hopefully full time down the road. This is more a lot of time when guys kind of get into that full time analyst role, guys and girls. It's more or less like maybe when they're kind of towards the end of their career, whereas I feel like I'm just hitting my stride. I'm in my prime. I just turned 30, but it's something that I want to dabble with. It's something that I want to do as much as I possibly can, as much as they'll have me. So, dude, I love it. It was so fun. I think that this weekend definitely will open up some opportunities for me right now and down the road.
Yeah, you've got a taste for it. You're addicted to the analyst role now. But I was going to say, how did the opportunity pop up? Is this something that you kind of had to bang the door on and ask them and say, hey, I want this gig? Or is it something that they just kind of, fell in your lap and you're like, and they just came to you and said, hey, Michael, do you want to do some analyst work?
I've been banging on the door for a while now. Definitely, I've been banging on the door for a few years. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And, I did, when I initially started to do it kind of publicly, I kind of did it in the wrong way and rubbed some people the wrong way. But ultimately, I think that one thing that's helped me get the opportunity to go be an analyst this last weekend was being down at the PI. It's gotten me a lot of face time with a lot of the UFC employees. And, there's over 500 guys on the roster, so it's easy to get lost in the shuffle unless you're part of the top 1%. You know what I mean? So I think that being down here and getting some face time with the right people, I won't name any names, but just getting some face time with the right people and just expressing that, I'm still very interested in this. And I think that definitely helped me.
Well, speaking of this past weekend, we just want to quickly touch on the Wonderboy Thompson Darren Till fight. Tell us, it's a close fight. A lot of people had Thompson winning. A lot of people agreed with the decision with Till winning. Who did you think won that main event?
I definitely think Thompson won. It was evident from the get-go that Till was going to pressure him, but that's kind of plays into Wonderboy style. That karate style involves a lot of counter striking. So the fight kind of went just how I thought it would. I called that it would be a unanimous decision, but I called it would be for Thompson. And, you know, I know that I said on the broadcast that I'd like to see the numbers because I think Thompson outstruck him. Numbers came back and Till actually outstruck him, but I didn't get to see the round-by-round stats. But here's the thing. Even if Thompson won, it would still be very controversial. It's just one of those fights that's so close that, you know, it doesn't matter who would win. See, Joseph, it doesn't matter who would have won. It still would have been showered in controversy in terms of, like, who won the fight. This guy got robbed, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was a crazy situation with obviously, you know, Wonderboy being the much higher ranked guy flying down into Till's hometown. Do you think that, you know, how do you think it affected Till, the fact that he sort of, you know, the weight cut didn't go according to plan and he sort of seemingly had to weigh in the next day as well? You know, we're hearing that he may have to cut weight, you know, essentially on the day to make that 188. Do you think ultimately that was, you know, an advantage for him or a disadvantage?
Ultimately, I think, you know, he should have made weight the first time, and obviously that there's some family emergency he had to tend to.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna bash on the guy for that. Family comes first before everything, but making weight really is a big deal in the sport. But I think it kind of breaks even given the fact that he had to make weight the day of the fight. I mean, you got to think about this. Till's a really big guy. He even said on an Instagram post the day before weigh-ins, a fan asked him on his Instagram how much he weighed, and he said 98 kilos. And for people that don't know kilos, that translates to 216 pounds, and that's the day before weigh-ins. So we're talking over 40-pound weight cut. And you can find this on his Instagram page. I'm not blowing smoke.
Yeah.
But you know, for him to weigh in at 174 and a half, he only got to rehydrate up 13 and a half pounds. Given from my own experiences cutting weight, being big for my weight class, I can go from 155 to 170 in the blink of an eye. You know what I mean? So Till definitely had to cut weight the day of the fight. So I think it kind of breaks even. You know what I mean? But maybe it benefited him to be lighter on fight day. I know that sometimes when I've overhydrated and came into the octagon a little too heavy, it's hampered my performance. But you know, either way, he should have just made weight. You know, when he was contracted to make weight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's switch the topics and let's talk about you, Michael, because it's been a crazy last few weeks and I suppose sort of months for you. Of course, we know we can't talk about what happened with the bus incident at UFC 223, but just talk to us about what it felt like for you to actually not fight on that UFC 223 card and sort of having to sit back and watch it without being a part of it.
Well, first and foremost, I didn't attend the event. I didn't actually go to the fights. I watched them from my hotel room. But you know, it was devastating, man. I trained really hard. This was my first time I've done a full training camp in Las Vegas. First time I did a full training camp at the UFC PI. You know, my dad was born in Brooklyn, and he's not with us now, so it kind of fighting in Brooklyn had some deep meaning to me. And you know, I was very proud that I'd get the opportunity to fight where my dad was born. So you know, so that was definitely tough. It was a hard pill to swallow, and you know, it's still kind of hasn't digested yet. You know, I should be on to new blood right now, but I'm having to stay focused on Anthony. Hasn't been hard. He's a really tough competitor. But you know, I really was very well prepared for that fight. I mean, it's a bummer that I didn't get to go out and show the world on April 7th. You know, the product that I was going to bring to the octagon, but you know, you got to look at the glass is half full. You know what I mean? I'm getting the opportunity to fight in Vegas, same guy. You know, it gives me another training camp to be here at the PI and improve myself as a fighter, as a human being. You know what I mean? So, you know, I can't look at the negatives. I got to focus on the positives, and ultimately, everything is going to work itself out.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize you had that, you know, connection to Brooklyn because of your father being born there. So I guess that kind of adds another layer. That's crazy. I was wondering, sort of mentally, how did you sort of regroup afterwards? I know that like now the fight's been rebooked, but I imagine as a fighter, like when you train for weeks and weeks and weeks on end to fight a guy, you need that release, and you didn't really get that release. And I imagine, you know, being in that hotel room would have just been kind of surreal for you. How long afterwards was it before you kind of, I guess, collected yourself?
Dude, I was already, you know, it didn't take long for me to collect myself because, you know, within days of the incident happening, obviously I needed time to let my body heal. Not a lot I can say about that, but you know, I had to go home and kind of keep myself in check. You know what I mean? When I had all this, like, not like aggression, but I just had a lot of energy. I trained for 8 weeks really hard, and I didn't get to go fight. So I had all this energy, and you know, I had some circumstances that kept me from doing anything active for about 4 weeks. So kind of showed up here for Las Vegas to start my training camp with a lot of pent up energy.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm doing. You know what? I just don't focus on it. You know what I mean? I'm just focused. You got to focus on the task at hand. You can't live in the past. You know, if I focus on all this stuff that happened in Brooklyn, you know, it could hold me back from having a good performance on July 7th. So, you know, all that stuff's behind me right now. I'm just focusing on what's ahead of me, and that's Anthony Pettis, July 7th. You know, I can't let this stuff cloud my vision. You know, my vision is to become a world champion. I will become a world champion. And if I keep myself held back from what's happened in the past, it can kind of hold me back for what I predict will happen for me in my future.
And speaking of Pettis, obviously when everything went down, he was one of the guys that was sort of named to potentially go in the main event against Khabib. But ultimately his team sort of decided against it, and we saw Al sort of ended up taking that spot in the main event. Were you surprised that Pettis didn't jump on the opportunity to be in the main event and fight for the title? And if you were in a similar position, I mean, it's a huge gamble. You're taking on a guy that you weren't preparing for, but if you got a shot at fighting for the title last minute against a guy like Khabib, do you think you would have taken that fight in a similar situation?
If somebody offered me a short notice fight against a champion, I don't care if it's Stipe Miocic. If they're like, hey, you want to fight Stipe on 24 hours notice for the title, I'm going to jump on it. You know what I mean? So different strokes for different folks. I can't say what was going on in his head. You know, the thing that surprised me most was just Max Holloway not being able to compete. You know what I mean? That's the biggest surprise of all of them. Anthony not stepping up to fight him or whatever. That doesn't surprise me at all. You know that someone on this card is going to step in at the opportunity. There's plenty of lightweights on the card, so you know that's kind of that. The only thing that surprised me about that instance was the commission not letting Max Holloway finish his weight cut.
Yeah, I actually saw your coach Rick Little. He was speaking about how, you know, he's sort of, I don't know if he's responsible for this mentality, but you're always at championship weight. That's kind of something they sort of drill in your mind at Sick Jitsu, that, you know, always be ready, always be at championship weight. Was that sort of the case at 223? And is it true that maybe the UFC even mentioned that, hey, if for whatever reason Max Holloway can't fight, you might be the next guy in line, or at least in consideration to sort of replace him? Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, Rick had been saying, especially for this card, just because, as we've seen, Khabib and Ferguson is plagued with, there's, who knows, that's got some voodoo magic surrounding that matchup, you know what I mean? So it was something that we talked about in this camp, like, hey, let's get you down to 55 and a half the night before. You know, usually I make weight the night before weigh-ins. So, you know, going, you know, as we had our last few training sessions before we left for New York, that was kind of the conversation, like, hey, just see, in 1 pound is a big difference. For some people that are like, oh, 1 extra pound is not a big deal. Yeah, well, when you're big for your weight class, 1 pound is huge. Yeah. So, but we had discussed it, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to get down to 55 and a half the night before, and we're going to wake up on championship weight just in case, you know what I mean? And, you know, that's not a bad habit to have to make championship weight.
And I mean, there's a little bit of controversy from people about who the actual champion of the division is. I mean, you got Conor McGregor, who got stripped of his title, but many people still kind of see him as the champion. You've got Tony Ferguson, who was the interim champ, but now he's out with an injury. And you've got Khabib, who fought Al Quinta for the title, but it wasn't exactly a performance that a lot of people thought maybe makes him the definitive champion. And also, it wasn't against, you know, a top-ranked guy in the division to win the title. So when you're sort of thinking about who the champion is, who to yourself, who do you think is the champion?
First and foremost, all 3 guys are elite, world-class fighters. Yeah. Let's just get that out. Let's get that out there right away before I answer. All 3 guys are world-class. All 3 guys are elite, top of the heap for sure. But in my eyes, Tony Ferguson's the champion. His win streak has a lot of prestigious names to it. You know, he beat Kevin, he beat Rafael dos Anjos, he beat Edson Barboza. He's got that long laundry list of guys in his win streak. I mean, what's his win streak? 10 fight win streak or 11?
Yep, 10.
dude, that's unprecedented. You know what I mean? So I look at Tony as the champion, but you know, I'm not taking anything away from Khabib. He's got what 25-0, 26-0 record altogether. So his win streak's insane. But I look at Tony as the champion. You know what I mean? And now if Khabib and Tony fight, who knows how that fight goes? But just in my eyes, I think Tony's the champion.
Does that change sort of for you as far as who you would like to face, you know, for the title when, you know, you eventually do fight for the belt? Obviously, Tony Ferguson, who you see as a legitimate champion. Or you know, like let's say, for example, Conor McGregor ends up coming back and winning the belt. You know, would there be sort of more, you know, want for you to sort of fight him, especially, you know, given UFC 223?
Actually, of all the guys, I'd rather fight Tony. Just because Tony and I were supposed to fight, you know what I mean? Tony and I were supposed to fight in 2016, and that never came to fruition. And I look at Tony as the toughest matchup for me. And with that being said, I think him being the toughest matchup for me will bring out the best in me. You know what I mean? I'm the type of guy where I feel like if you throw me in against the guy that's going to be, you know, the guy that's my hardest matchup, I think that's going to bring out the best in me. And I know that the best in me can beat anybody on any given day to become a world champion. So, you know, Tony's the fight that I like for myself.
And it's interesting because the division has so many interesting matchups. Obviously, Dustin Poirier had that great performance against Justin Gaethje, and that kind of elevated him to a lot of people saying, hey, this guy might actually have a shot of getting the next title shot. Now he's fighting Eddie Alvarez. They've put that fight back together. What do you think about that fight being put together and made again?
Hey, I think it's a good fight. Here's the thing, you know, we don't know what's going on with Khabib. You know, he's got Ramadan, and, you know, obviously there's negotiations to be had, you know, potentially with Conor. So would it have been a good move on Poirier's part to sit and maybe see if he gets the title fight? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I think that they would have put Poirier in there before they would have put Alvarez in there. But, you know, there's a storyline there between the guys. They have some unfinished business. So, you know, it's a good fight to make. It's a good fight to make for the division. The one thing I like about what's going on is the landscape of the lightweight division is really finally getting some movement. This goes all the way back to the UFC Detroit card. You know what I mean? We've had the number 1 and number 2 guy matched up. It was supposed to be Khabib and Tony. Then we had Barbosa and Kevin matched up. We had Alvarez and Gaethje matched up, and all these matchups were just like really good pivotal matchups for ranked guys. So there's just a lot of good movement right now. So Poirier and Alvarez fighting is good for the division. It's going to keep things moving, keep the rankings shuffling around. You know, keep the top 5 really interesting. So that's the one thing I've really been enjoying the last 6 months is all the movement in my division.
Yeah. So do you sort of see those guys as sort of like the next logical guys potentially for the next title shot? Or what would you think if sort of McGregor came back in the mix and sort of went straight into a title shot against Khabib?
You know, it's hard to say. You know, he did beat Eddie Alvarez, who was the champion at the time, before he was stripped of his title. You know, who knows? You know what I mean? That's up to the brass, but it doesn't hurt Alvarez or Poirier it doesn't hurt either of those guys to go out and kick some ass in July and try to cement yourself to jump ahead in line. Either way, whoever wins between Poirier and Alvarez in July should just sit and get the next. That should be the next fight. I mean, I don't see Tony coming back anytime soon.
Yeah.
I think that injury really is going to require a lot of healing. So whoever wins out of Alvarez and Poirier, I think should sit and wait for a title fight.
And I guess the thing is, you versus Pettis, it's a huge fight as well in the division. What do you think is up for grabs for the winner of that fight? Obviously, Pettis is a huge name, and with a big performance over that, it really raises your profile even more in the division. But in terms of what's next, where do you think it sets you up in the division in terms of rankings and who you should be fighting next as well?
That's tough to say. Somebody actually asked me that today, and you know, I haven't really thought that far ahead, and you know, nor do I really want to. I'm focused on the one big goal at the end, and that's the belt. I mean, I'm here to be a world champion. When the day comes that I'm not chasing a gold strap and I don't belong in the UFC, but that's the only thing I'm focusing on. I know that a win over Anthony Pettis gets me closer to a title fight, gets me closer to becoming world champion. You know, I haven't really thought about the matchup that comes next. You know what I mean? I'm really focused on the task at hand. You know, especially now since we've had the fight, since we've had to make this fight, you know, a second time. I'm just focused on Anthony. I'm not focused on who could potentially be next or anything like that. the focus is Anthony, and the only thing I know is when I win, it's going to get me closer to what I'm destined for.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, you focus on Pettis, and you've sort of conveyed last time to us how you're never short on motivation. But what is it? What is it like sort of doing the same training camp back to back for the same opponent? It's a little bit weird. I imagine a lot of it will be drilling the same things that you already kind of learned and maybe even mastered in the last camp. So is it sort of easier sort of doing the same thing because you know what you're doing, or is it a bit more tedious kind of going like, oh man, I already did this and now I've got to do it again?
No, it's easy. Here's the thing. When I train for a fight, I train to get better all around as a fighter. I don't cater my training camps around who I'm fighting. I cater them around myself. I try to just broaden my skill set as a whole. You know what I mean? It's like if you have a whole training camp game planning for your opponent to do a certain set of moves or things and they don't do it, it fucks you up on fight night. It's like, I trained for this guy to do this. He's not doing it. Now my whole game plan's shot. I'm not into that. So it's not a tedious training camp. I'm just continuing what I was doing before, and that's just getting better all around. Stand-up, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, my conditioning, my strength, and it's all catered to me. It's not catered to somebody else. You know what I mean? I've never been the type of guy to I'm not formulating my camps around who I'm fighting. I'm trying to get better in my deficits.
And do you think the silver lining here is, I mean, you spoke about the glass half full, glass half empty. Do you think the silver lining here is being a part of UFC 226? Because it's a big marquee card. The whole world's going to be watching that card. Does it feel good for this fight to sort of be rebooked for such a good event?
Dude, absolutely. I'm fighting in Las Vegas. It's like here's a couple facts. I've never lost when I fought in Las Vegas. I've never lost when I've trained in Las Vegas. And I've never lost when I'm on the same card as DC, my man. So there is a lot of silver lining to this. It's I may reside in Spokane, Washington, but my second home is Las Vegas. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of silver lining to it. I don't gotta go travel and acclimate to the East Coast or whatever coast or whatever country. I'm here. I'm training here. I'm fighting here. And it benefits me.
Do you know where this fight will fall in terms of the card? Is it going to be main card? Is it going to be prelims? And do you have a preference?
To my understanding, it's on the main card. And,
nice.
I've always liked being the main prelim on FS1. You get your own commercial. You get a lot of publicity. You know what I mean? Mainly like the commercial on FS1. It's kind of cool to see. And another thing is when you're the last prelim, you know exactly when you're going to fight. So it makes it easy for your warm-up and stuff. Sometimes if you're like halfway in the middle of a card, like a fight can go short, a fight can go long, and you warm up, and then all of a sudden you're sitting for a while, or all of a sudden fight's in short, you're having to rush your warm-up. So sometimes it's nice to be the last prelim because you know when you're going to fight. You know what I mean? But to my understanding, it's going to be on the main card. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Look, Michael, we really appreciate your time. We know you're in the tub. We don't want to be too greedy with us. As we let you go, what is the official prediction? Does it change at all, given that it's, the new location, new event? How do you see yourself getting it done against Anthony Pettis at UFC 226?
As always, the game plan's punch, wrestle, choke, and get my hand raised.
Well, it's going to be exciting, guys.
Vegemite sandwiches to celebrate, right?
Oh, yeah, dude. Vegemite sandwiches and an ice cold Zima. Let's do this.
Well, guys, it's going to be exciting. UFC 226 just got a little bit more packed and a little bit more exciting. Make sure to follow Michael on Twitter and Instagram at MikeMav22. Michael, thank you so much for joining us from the hot tub. It's been a lot of fun. Best of luck for the fight. Thank you so much.
Cheers.